Good morning again, folks. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your tea or your coffee or certainly the scones. I do like an occasional scone. This first session is slightly different. Ordinarily, the speaker would actually go to the lectern and speak from there, but we've decided to do this as something of a fireside chat. Now, when you do that normally, you strip all this crap away and put in a couple of leather armchairs and meerschaum pipes and you crack on. Too much faff. We don't have time to do that, but we have made an effort. There you go. So this is what you have to use your imagination for the rest of this, okay? Our speaker is Josh Novelle. Now, Josh is Senior Director of People Experience and Insights for Warner Music Group. That is a hell of a job title. What does it actually mean? What do you do?
Well, I just try to cram as many buzzwords in there as possible, really. No, seriously speaking, what I do is I look at everything that's happening for our people all around the world, and what can we do to try and improve that? That is the gross kind of oversimplification of it. A lot of it happens, we're a global company, a lot of it happens in the digital landscapes of what we do, and quite frankly, it is getting things out the way of our people. I think that's the simplest thing to do.
Why does that matter? I mean, you know, when push comes to shove, employee experience, who cares?
Yeah. Because when you really think about it, a lot of things we put in from a corporate perspective, I always look at it in kind of three lanes. We deploy, let's talk about some sort of suite or some sort of platform or something like that. We deploy it and we'll often think, oh, here's the kind of cost of ownership and it's licenses, it's that sort of stuff. Then if you go one step further, you're also thinking about the headcount that you need to keep the lights on and keep it rolling and things like that. How many organizations actually think about the cost of usage? Every single time your employee are using your platform, spending 5-10 minutes on it, that could be $2-3 worth of company time being invested in it. Everyone always says the biggest expenditure to a company is its people, shortly followed by normally the facilities and the actual buildings itself. So what we look at is how can we make that far more efficient for every single organisation? How do we take responsibility and accountability for that employee efficiency that happens there?
How, I mean, in your time in the industry, how have employee expectations changed?
Oh, radically, and I think now is probably a prime example of that sort of time. We're existing in a world where we have large organisations that are saying, right, back to the office, it's 5 days a week time, to people talking about hybrid and flexi and things like that, and then other organisations talking about a 4-day working week. All of this is happening simultaneously, and that's three very bold, different flavours happening at the same time. I would say employee experience is crucial now because it's the team that will experiment, will look at how it actually affects the business, because that's the end bit of the title, that's the most important bit. It's the insights. What is this actually doing financially for the company? We're not just going to go, hey, well, let's wheel out some cupcakes and some pizza every day because that's going to keep people happy. We could do that, but what would you measure out the back of it? You'd probably have 5-year kind of retention goals and things like that, but let's be honest, there's so many other things happening in those 5 years, it's really hard to measure out. So we're doing, what can we do? Small, tiny hypotheses to say, let's improve people's lives. And in a vast majority, when you want to hit as many people as possible, because I'm pinching pennies off the pound here, I need to hit 7,000-8,000 people a week with these sort of things to make it financially viable. They're the ones we're going to be going after.
So what kind of things have you been doing so far? Give me some examples.
Yeah, so a really good example is we deployed something that we call the WMG Assistant. This is a kind of Frankenstein of technologies, but the end goal of this is we all exist in worlds where there are suites of technology that exist across our workforce. Some of you might have a singular suite, some of you might have multitudes of these. So as an example, we are a SAP house for finance, we're a Workday house for our HR pieces, we're a ServiceNow house when it comes to a lot of our IT pieces and things like that. What we've done is essentially eliminated all of those platforms from the employee experience. Now, we don't want people to remember, oh, I need to go to this platform to do that thing. We simply have a desktop chatbot that someone says, I want to put in annual leave, and it'll go, great, what days? And you go, next Thursday, Friday, and it goes, cool, let me just ping an API, let me come back to you with your balance, and go, yep, so this will be your remaining balance afterwards. Do you want to do that? Yes. Cool, that'll be submitted. When your manager approves it, you'll simply get an Outlook invite with the out of office kind of scribbled in there. All of that is going into our HR technologies. The employee does not have to interact with that HR technology in any way, shape or form. So we are looking at, if I use that process as an example, that used to take on average 12 minutes end to end, opening up a platform, navigating into it, finding your phone because you've got to go through single sign-on and all those sort of things that you always have the trouble with, navigating through menus, then eventually, oh, here's the calendar, thank God. Click, 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 click. What's the reason? Submit, okay? That is a 12-minute process. We've baked that down to about a minute and a half. Now, the other side of it is we are taking that time and tangibly showing it. The other half of the equation for us is we are looking at downstream ticketing impacts. That is actual physical time and money for an organization. How many things happen? How many of you in the room look at your tier 1 tickets, and a majority of them are how do I, where do I, or basic human error stuff. That's all they are, and that is a majority of kind of the support time that we have to do. When you have bots doing it for you, it's considerably harder to, well, I clicked the wrong date, I clicked the wrong this, I clicked the wrong that. Like, it's just eliminating that, and we are doing that on steroids across everything else. So if you want to find a document, well, how many repositories, directories do we have? We've got SharePoint via Teams, we've got SharePoint sites, we've got OneDrives, we've got Dropboxes, we've got Google Drives, we've got all these things happening. We've just simply gone, by the way, I'll caveat this with, we're a hugely creative organization. We're an organization where you tell someone, we really want you to do it this way, they're too cool to do that. They're like, oh, I'm just on the phone to David Bowie's family, like, just leave me alone, I'll get on with my job. And it's hard to argue with that sort of logic when they're bringing in multi-million dollars for us every single year. So we just get out of their way. We simply say, you store in a place that is right for you to store, and our chatbot can look for it for you. So it's tagged up to all those things. I'm looking for a document. Great, what's it called? I think it's something like this. When did you last edit it? I was thinking something like this. And it's just a basic logic engine that brings that back to them. And we quantify a rough time saving for each and every time that happens. As I said earlier, we're an organization that is far too cool to do anything corporate. And to quote one of our creative directors, this is the first good thing corporate has ever done in Warner Music Group, which I'm going to take that as that's going to be on my gravestone one day. I think he said the least shit thing, actually, to be honest. So I'll take that. Same thing, really. Yeah, same things. But I'm going to take that with me as a mark of pride of saying our job is to get out the way of these people. We hire some creative, fantastic people, and then we put so much crap in their way. Let's just eliminate it. Let's take it out. Let's try and enable them to do their job far more efficiently.
I've got about knocking on 40 years with the BBC. A friend of mine just retired, and he used to talk about the programme prevention unit. Mm-hmm. You know, the people who were put on earth specifically to stop programmes happening. Yeah. They exist in every organisation. Yeah. There or thereabouts. Are you making life more difficult for your competitors who are not doing this kind of thing?
I would certainly say so. I mean, how many organisations, or myself personally, I'll tell you a little story. I won't name the brand, but I'm one of these people that I was working in an organisation once that was a timesheet organisation. So I'm seeing a few groans already in the room. That we've all been through that pain. We know that logging it. I actually got a HR write-up because I was the person that wrote in my timesheet and created a category for logging timesheets. And I logged half an hour every single week for logging timesheets. And they were like, no, that's not how it works. That's not how this game's played. And I was like, yes, it is. You want me to accurately show my billable hours. Let's be honest about that. Let's look at the cost of ownership for a time logging platform. Like, let's get out of people's way. How many things do we do in an organization that if you were trapped in a lift with this, put away the old adage of the CEO, you're sitting in a lift with a CFO. How are you making me money? Every single thing that we do as an organization, or as we do as a team now, bakes down to one of two things: the protection of revenue or the creation of revenue. If it does not do one of those two things, we do not do it.
COVID, basically, well, it's inevitable because essentially it changed a lot of people's working experiences. It became really apparent very, very, very quickly that we could do things differently and just be just as productive and just as useful and things like that. There's no way back from that, really, is there?
It's certainly a very hard fight to try and do it. I mean, I think I don't know the answer here. I know my personal preferences, and I think that's what it's got to come down to in an organisation.
Which is what?
Well, my personal preference is if I'm sitting on the phone to Tokyo for 6 hours a day, why the hell should I be commuting halfway into London to sit in an office to then do it? It makes absolutely no sense. If I'm willing to spend my own electricity, which is quite a sizable chunk at the moment to do that, let me do it.
You're obviously very well paid.
Let's cut that out. But you're right, the cat is out the bag, because organisations had this long-standing line. My partner, she's in the legal profession, And for years and years and years, you cannot possibly do your job from home, was the line. COVID came along, and it put the test out in the light. Barely any of those professions got furloughed. Your traditional ones that have always said you can't do your job from home, your finance, your IT, your HR, all of this sort of stuff. Did any one of them get furloughed? Very rarely. That's telling them exactly you can do your job from home, and we've seen it. Now, unless a company has a real hard honesty look at themselves and say, look, we didn't make money that year, we're in this together, they're kind of doing a bit of an interesting piece. And I know for me, there's wild experimentation going on. I talked earlier about 4-day working weeks and things like that, which, by the way, if you haven't read the outputs of the study and things like that, really crack into that because that's fascinating. But you've also got the other side of the spectrum. We had, I believe it was Goldman Sachs or Deutsche Bank. They tried to make it a salary sacrifice benefit to work from home. They tried to charge their employees, and you had all of these kind of hugely gifted scripters and stuff that are trying to figure out for the bank what does blockchain mean, and all these sort of real cutting edge stuff that they could quite frankly like put an open to work banner on their LinkedIn. They'd be gone in an hour, let alone days. They'd be gone. And you're trying to say to these people, well, yeah, it's going to be a salary sacrifice thing now. Absolutely, like, no. And the outcry against it reversed in about 24 hours. They reversed that entire decision to make it that scheme. We're seeing employees vote with their feet more than ever before.
Is that a generational thing?
Yes and no. I think for me, we always talk, and for those in the room, my background is actually in HR and talent. That's where I kind of came up and through. So I'm probably the bane of most of your people's existence when we're talking about standing up creative things and things like that. So when we're looking at generational things, there's much more correlation between times in people's lives than the actual things where we talk about, oh, it's Gen Zs and it's Gen Xs and it's all this sort of stuff. It's actually phases in people's lives. So actually there's virtually very little difference between someone that's 23 that's entered the workplace that's going through, oh, I want to now claim maternity, to someone that's 37, 38 doing exactly the same thing. You're going to see the same behaviors because it's the same drivers that are important to them. So try not to kind of just brush people with one thing to say, hey, this is the TikTok generation. They want a TikTok dance room in the back and things like that. No, they don't. They want the things that are going to make it important for them, which is feeling valued in an organisation.
Again, boiling it down to absolute, a rough description, your job is to take the crap out of their way, to make things smoother for them, to facilitate it. Yeah. How do you measure the success of that? So, really varies all over the place. So we come up with some absolute harebrained hypotheses that we test. As an example of one recently, we looked at candidates that came into our offices for a face-to-face interview, used facilities, so bathrooms and things like that in the office, and then end up refusing it. We're an American-style company, so you can imagine we have American-style toilets, which aren't the most invested in an organisation. So they could be higher, they could be better quality. We had a hypothesis. What if we improved them? Would we see some sort of number change? And we did. That was 20 quid. We went down to Costco. We bought better loo roll and put the cleaners in there a bit more. It was a very minute change, but it showed a tangible financial thing. Because each time we have to go back out for a round of recruitment, there's money there. Time is money in an organisation. I talked earlier on about the time savings and looking at how long is this thing taking, how often is it being done. That is what my team is doing day to day to day around the organisation. We've started doing some really interesting things around the internal marketing and advertisement of training and development opportunities as well. How often are you sent kind of a PDF brochure once a quarter and be like, oh, here's the offering, here's the this, here's the that. We've actually kind of spun that and said, oh, well, Mark, you're looking at a Tableau dashboard for the 4th time today. That says something. That's not about you, Mark, that's about the actions you're doing. So it's not Big Brother technology. What if it then popped up, my chatbot kind of activates and goes, hey, you're about to present this, because if so, here's a 2-minute video from that bulk library that we subscribed to years back that no one really knew was there on presenting data in a storytelling manner. And then we look at people that engage with that, we check in with them the next day, was that resource useful? Outstanding results, and actually utilization of those off-the-shelf L&D resources skyrocketed because we're simply making
basic hypothesis. When could this thing be useful for people? It's all experimentation, but it's knowing which to drop and which to kind of continue and grow. I think we were talking a bit the other day, and there's a lot of professionals that I've worked with in my time, they become wed to their own idea. They become wed to their baby, almost to say. It's like, we've got a saying in the team, it's like, you can always say your baby's ugly. Like, doesn't matter if you've spent a year on this thing and you've curated it and it's become your passion job, look at it. If it's not doing the job that you think it's going to do, take it out. Don't become wed to that thing. And I think too often we've gone down that road. And that can really, it really scares quite a few people. We're talking about people that are like, oh, I want to see your waterfall spreadsheets and I want to see your finance plan a year and a half in advance. And we kind of go, that's not how our team works. We're making a commitment to you that whenever you check in, we're going to make financial sense though. And that's the big play that we're kind of doing here. And a lot of organizations are starting to warm up to this idea. We've got big names looking to enter this employee experience realm. We've also got vendors entering this realm as well, where they're launching new modules and calling it employee experience. But as you're seeing, it's the digital, it's the physical, it's all things. It's not just simply a new module to a platform.
There was a Cambridge Don called Quiller Cooch, who taught, amongst others, Alistair Cook, the great broadcaster. And Alistair Cook once presented him with an essay, and it was the finest piece of writing ever submitted by any student in Cambridge. And Quiller Cooch was getting ready for dinner, so he was standing there in a shirt and sock suspenders and things, and going through this and what have you. And he took a red pen and basically obliterated half of it and said, "You must learn to murder your darlings."
Yes.
It's exactly the same thing, but it's extremely difficult to do because even if it's work, people become emotionally attached to an idea, emotionally invested in it.
Yeah, it's a huge paradox, and I'm probably talking and describing several people in the room, and I apologise for this, but I've worked with so many people throughout my career that they describe themselves as an Oracle professional, an SAP professional. It's like, you're not my employee. Let's be very frank about that. You are this organization's employee that I'm happening to foot the bill for. I think that's a crucial change for organizations, because we need people that are going to solve our problems, not figure out how to upsell other suites into our technology. Not to go, oh, well, we could solve this, but I just need that thing there. There's always going to be a thing. We're surrounded by great technologists all around us. There is so much stuff you can essentially Frankenstein together on a shoestring budget to show viability in there. Just don't be afraid to do it.
Yeah. I mean, aside from buying better bog roll, what have you found the hardest things to get right or fix?
It's a really interesting question. I think if we go back to that chatbot example, people were kind of like, oh, but what about the people that like doing it that way? What about the people that like the old school? What about people that they're sitting there and they're like, no, I know my routines and I know how to do it and I know how to do that. We just simply appeal to human laziness. Like, if we talk about the foundation of needs, just say, let's be honest, do you like doing that stuff? You're going to find very few people that actually like doing these corporate processes in their thing. They're sitting on, I don't know, TUI.com and they're booking their holiday. They don't want to go, oh, well, let me click through a 20-step process to actually, like, my manager hasn't come back to me yet, so can I book this thing? And they have that dilemma of, can I book a holiday before it's approved, and all this sort of stuff. We just light speed that sort of stuff for them. Mm-hmm. Like, it's coming down to, well, what really makes you valuable to the organization? What makes you tick in the organization? And that can be a really big conversation, because certain people sit there going, well, my job is to take Excel spreadsheet from this system, format it a little bit, and import it into that system. Let's all be honest, we know with growing catalogues of RPA pieces and things like that, those jobs are going to be cannibalized incredibly quickly, if not already. And we're simply just saying, let's get ahead of that. Let's experiment our way out of that. Let's figure out what's beneficial for people, and let's make more time for them to do those things.
This might be a slightly mischievous question, but working within a creative business,
yes. What
do you do when you find someone who loves the process, who embraces the process, just hangs on to it and really doesn't want to let it go?
We let them do it. We genuinely let them do it. So we will have, when we're talking about overlays and things like that, it kind of doesn't matter whether you're doing it my way or not. It doesn't matter if you're still opening up the platform and still doing it the old school way, because guess what? My bots are still trained to do data validation over those fields live. And the first time they get something wrong in it just goes, oh, you sure about this? You've put, I don't know, an expenses claim in 3 years in the past. Are you sure you want to do this? Because this is going to hit and reopen. Your finance business partner is going to ring you and not be happy with you if you submit this thing. It's the first time they kind of go, oh yeah, it's useful. It's stopped me doing something. It's been that kind of, are you sure moment before you go ahead with it. And so I would say we've done it in such a way, there's not really a way to not do it now, which might sound a bit creepy and controlling, but it's done in a purposeful way to be helpful to people.
There'll be a multiplicity of businesses represented here in the room. What would be the takeaways you would want for people in this room to actually think, well, that might be quite useful?
For me, it goes back to that piece where so many of our pieces, especially from the HR perspective, you will always hear the line, we just haven't got a seat at the table, okay? You hear that day in, day out. And I fundamentally believe it's because we don't even appreciate that the table is talking a completely different language. Like I grew up in the L&D world, so doing training courses and things like that, and they're like, oh, I want to have a seat at the table because I want to sit down, I want to talk about bums on seats, and I want to do this sort of stuff. And it's like, what does that mean? What's the CEO interested in? CEO is normally interested in shareholder value, so financials. What's the CFO interested in? It's the financials. What's the chief people officer interested in? It's the financials behind the people. There is a common thread here, and it is the financials for the company. Even if you're in a charity or a non-profit, you've still got to keep the lights on. You've got to keep the oil burning. They are the crucial things. And too often we get a little bit sidetracked and a little bit lost to the purpose there. And yeah, I'm talking very, very financially in these sort of things, but it's around being able to do great stuff for employees and make it financially make sense, so that when the CFO comes knocking on your doors talking about layoffs and things like that, you can suddenly go, well, hang on, my team's cost neutral. That's a hugely important thing that we've been able to do. We've actually been able to avoid a good chunk of layoffs because of that.
We were talking before the break about how various companies are sort of trying to reduce the amount of carbon they're producing and things, and how this can be done within the context of IT and things. Is that something you've discussed, looked at?
We have and we haven't at the moment. So it's one that we have in our mind's eye to try and do. We're obviously a US organisation, so we do things like ESG reports on a very regular basis. There are huge green initiatives that we commit to in that. But we're also in a conundrum where, what if Ed Sheeran says he wants to fly all over the world? How do you say, no, you can't do that? How do you show the carbon footprint for these global superstars that they want to get out and they want to hit their fans? Because that's all on our balance sheet at the end of the day. So we're in a bit of a paradox there where we want to do better, but because of the nature of our business, there's certain areas where we can't do better. Lockdown, however, was a hugely exciting opportunity for us. I wasn't involved with it myself, but we were the first organisation that put gigs in Roblox and things like that. So if anyone's got kids in the room, like Roblox is kind of this Minecrafty thing, and we put our artists performing live in it. We did it with Fortnite. We did all these sort of things. We're an organisation that is not afraid to innovate where it makes sense, and where we had large-scale cancellations of a good amount of stuff that our artists were passionate about. So if going back to that, what's the value piece, not just for our employees, but there's another team that looks at what's valuable for our artists. That's huge, because they were able to say, well, these artists, some of them really don't like studio time, but they do it because it's a burden of their role, and they're like, I want to do it because it's my outlet of being creative. But you know what? They absolutely love being on stage. So they want to tour, they want to do that as much as possible. How do you think they felt during COVID? We're still going, hey, record. We're cracking that whip. We're saying be creative while they're locked up in a room. And like, you have to be very, very careful about how you manage those creative talents, because if not, you end up with the kind of Imagine Hollywood backlash thing where it was just came out and that's hugely insensitive, that you're living in a mansion type thing. And so we have to be very careful about how we innovate, but we have to do it very purposefully.
So, but this is apropos of nothing really, but I was listening to somebody the other day talking about the ABBA show, the holographic ABBA show at the moment. They went in there very, very cynical and said it was one of the best gigs they've ever been to in their lives. But somebody made the point that when they were at their peak in the 70s, they took over the Albert Hall for 2 nights. Now, I don't know what the capacity is for the Albert Hall for 2 nights. There were 3.5 million applications for tickets for those 2 nights. Just absolutely astonishing.
It is crazy.
Astonishing, you know.
It is crazy. And those experiences are crucial. So it's one of these things that I don't think many people think about, but when you go to an artist kind of concert, very few of them are just rocking up on the night now, plugging their guitar into the amp and then smashing it at the end. There is so much stuff that goes on in the background. Muse is a prime example. I mean, drone shows going on, like, they need to know exactly where those stars are going to be. It's a stage play. They need to know exactly where they're going to be moving. If not, you're going to have Adam Levine with a drone crashing straight into his head, and I don't want to be submitting the insurance claim on that one.
No. That'd be interesting to watch, though. Listen, any questions from the room at all for Josh? You know, we've got a gentleman there. Pete will get the microphone to you. We've got 5 minutes. We may as well use them.
Hi, Graham Robertson from Indicia here. A couple of mischievous questions, if I may. The first one is, you talked about the ultimate goal is to either retain revenue or grow revenue. Have you thought about making this as a service to other companies to buy, your API?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that one.
Have you thought about selling your API to other companies to make more income, generate more income?
Yeah, so this is an interesting piece for us. So when you're talking about the APIs and things like that, it's we are not really creating much of our own stuff. So for me personally, it feels like it'd be a bit cheeky to be like, hey, I look like a really pretty ball gown, but then you pull back the kind of Wizard of Oz curtain and you've got, oh, that's a bit of Microsoft Dynamics and a little bit of kind of LinkedIn, and it's a little bit of this and it's a little bit of that. Like, so for me, it would be disingenuous to kind of try and brand this as a product on its own. But there are certain pieces that are publicly available in this one. A good amount of the front end of it is actually a digital adoption platform called WalkMe. So if you were to ask one of our users, that would be probably the system they'd reel off. What they don't realize is that is triggering many more other things. So RPA pieces, talent stack things, HR stuff, finance bits in the background. So yes and no. I'd love to be able to sell it one day, but it would feel disingenuous to do that.
Thank you. The second question would be going back to your working from home policy. Obviously, we're seeing bigger companies now forcing people back to work.
Yes.
In your opinion, why is that?
Probably have to be quite careful what I say on this one. For me personally, it comes down to every single person in an organization is being asked to make financial sense of their role. If you are the person responsible for a skyscraper that is only open and occupied 25% of the time, I would not want to be in that position. So essentially, they're trying to make the efficacy for these buildings still existing by forcing people back into it. I think that's why organizations are doing it, because for the first time, you've got teams that are very unfamiliar with being able to talk numbers, being asked numbers. Like, why do we have 7 different locations around the UK? Why don't we just have one central mega hub and things like that? And you're seeing brands adapting to this in very different ways. Some of them are doing mass layoffs. Some of them are doing office closures and things like that. I think we're going to be remembering the ones that are doing the office closures first. Because if you've got a company that's profitable and yet it's laying off people, that's never quite sat well with me. Hopefully that answers your question.
It does. Thank you very much. And my last question is very mischievous indeed. I'm sure it's all in the room would like to know, when does Ed Sheeran apply for his holidays?
We always have bits and pieces coming out. So yeah, keep an eye at the social channels, things like that. I'm pretty active on like your LinkedIn's, etc. So if you I want to hear from you guys. At the end of the day, if you come up with a better idea than me, I'm certainly going to steal it.
Okay. Any other questions? No. Right. Can I ask you to thank Josh one more time, please? Thank you very much.